Welcome to the Elements of Success podcast with Johnny Dawson. This is the show that will inspire you to uncover your formula for success so you take charge of your story, overcome life's obstacles, and find fulfillment in all branches of life. With Johnny as your guide, you will break down the science of success and experiment with how you can combine key elements to uncover discipline you need to accelerate your journey towards prosperity. Now, on to today's episode.
Welcome to the Elements of Success podcast, where we will explore specific traits that break down barriers between you and success. We will achieve this by bringing on guests so they can share their stories of success. Today, we're joined by my co-host, Eric Johnson. Welcome back. Glad to have you on, my friend.
I'm excited. You got a great guest on this morning.
Absolutely, we do. And our guest, speaking of which, is none other than Justin Kershaw. He is the founder and president of Venia Medical. He's also an inventor with 2 patents and played football for Michigan State University. So, Justin, it is truly an honor and pleasure to have you on the Elements of Success today. Thank you so much for just your willingness to take time out of your schedule. We know how busy you are to join us. I would say this before Justin even starts to begin to talk on this podcast. He is without a doubt one of the most energetic, uplifting guys that I've ever been around. And which is no surprise to me of when I asked him which element of success he wanted to speak about, he responded, well, first, so backup story. First, he just sent me one text and he said sexy. And I said, Justin, we're not talking about sexy on the podcast. And then he responded back and he goes, just kidding, blessed. And I'm like, yep, I absolutely without a doubt knew that you would probably pick that word. And as soon as you picked it, I said, that's so Justin. And really blessed, the definition of that is bringing pleasure or good fortune. And I just have to say, man, I'm so glad to have you on today. And first, let's get this right out of the way. Why did you come up with the element of being blessed and wanting to discuss this topic?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me on, Johnny. I admire you. I admire your wife, Bora, your whole family. I actually remember I think it was the first time I ever met you. It was over a mutual friend's house, and we were watching like the presidential debate. And I could tell that you and I had different issues on gun control. And you broke it down so much in a kind and educated way. And I respected you because you were a vet, that my whole entire stance changed. So I was like, you know what, Johnny Dawson's all right with me. So I appreciate you having me on, man. And I would say that the reason I picked blessed is I think we all drink from wells that we didn't dig. You know, even if people that say they're self-made, it's a lie. Because at one point somebody changed your diaper, or somebody was kind enough to, help you eat, or somebody opened the door for you, whatever it may be. And if I have had any success, it's been because of grace, and it's been because I've had people that have loved me so much that they saw something in me, they brought something out of me. And so I really feel blessed, man, to be in the position that I am. And any success I've had or that I will have, it's not my own doing.
Absolutely. And, you kind of touch on a point up front here that it's kind of why we've created a podcast in general. And you do a lot of uplifting posts and share your stories with a lot of people and products and things that you've come along and made. And you've always kept in the back of your mind, how can this impact others and bless others from my doing, right? And so when you mentioned that, blessed was that element of success that you wanted to talk about, I immediately thought, Justin blesses people all the time with his uplifting spirit and his generosity and who he is as a person. So thank you for that, honestly. And I never knew. This is the first time I'm ever hearing this about gun control. And so Justin probably won't admit it, but he's probably bought a few guns since I had that conversation with him. So that's good.
Yeah, man, I got you to thank for it. And then I remember another time, man, this was years ago. You were giving a speech somewhere, and I was like, wow, Johnny's a really great public speaker. And you associated King David having PTSD. Mm-hmm. And my mind was like blown, because sometimes we try to make these biblical characters like mystify them, like they weren't actual human beings.
Right.
So, yeah, man, I appreciate you saying that. I really admire you and your family. You guys are so generous, man. And so, yeah, man, I'm better for knowing you, bro. We're both blessed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I appreciate that. And what Justin's referring to is I relate PTSD a lot of times to the story of David and Goliath, and everyone knows that David defeated Goliath, but what they don't know is because of that and what David was put in past beyond the story of Goliath is he was made to go to war and be a king of wars for a long period of time after that feat. And it caused David to really have a lot of PTSD. And it was that story that helped me overcome my issues with PTSD, because I always thought, if David can overcome this and put his faith and trust in the higher power and in God and Jesus, then why can't I as well? And so I share that story a lot of time with folks that are suffering with PTSD. Psalm 55 is basically an entire chapter of David contemplating suicide and reaching out to God because he keeps hearing the enemy's voices, etc. So on a side note, if someone that's really struggling with PTSD or overcoming that, and it doesn't have to be veterans. I mean, there's a lot of other types of PTSD from, especially with COVID and just the nurses and the doctors and everything they're going through. I'm really worried about what those after effects are. But thanks for bringing that up. That's a good side note here on our topic today of just trying to bless others. I think, as the definition states, right, it's bringing pleasure to bless, to be blessed, and keeping that in mind. That means also to give as well. To give as more, to me, is better to give than it is to receive, right? So why do you feel, Justin, that's important to give so that you may be blessed in your own endeavors and successes?
Yeah. Great question, man. But this term sounds very churchy, but I've always heard people say that you can't outgive God. And a lot of times if we are, restricted and selfish and we're living in anxiety, the best thing to do is to give something away, because it reveals that we have a scarcity mentality. And I believe there's a term I heard called the law of abundance, where it says there's more than enough for everybody to have more than enough, and still for more to be left over. And I think if we realize that God is generous, that there's more than enough for everybody to have, the way you get any fulfillment in life is to serve and to give. I think that's how we were wired.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think also, obviously for one to really commit to this notion of the more I give, the more I receive, to where I can become blessed. And it's to have that form and to develop of spiritual relationship as well. And as you and I are both Christians, I think that's a risk in itself, right? We're willing to put our faith into something that we haven't really seen or touched or felt yet, but we believe in it. And that's our faith in our Savior, right? Translating that idea to business and success, do you believe that there are some parallels in that same risk of, taking a leap of faith, if you will?
Oh, absolutely, man. I'm throwing all these terms, but this is how I've learned is that faith is spelled RISK. You have to take risks. And anybody that is going to start a business, if you have really tight pockets and I think you should be frugal and you should practice sound accounting. But if you're so tight-fisted, you don't want to invest the money to make a product that's done in excellence. If you don't want to risk, if you're anxious about not risking giving out samples to the community so people can try it to get feedback, I think you're setting yourself up for failure. Right. Because even that is having a scarcity mindset, and even what if you fail? Like, even the thought of failure is having a scarcity mindset, because you think that's your last great idea. Your mindset should be, if I fail at this, it's not my last great idea. I'll be successful at the next thing. So absolutely, man. I think, we talk about our faith, Johnny, as Christians, is that God has a monopoly on everything that's good, man. It pours out into every area of our life. So yeah, you have to take risks. You have to have faith. And I think you should approach everything with the mindset of abundance.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thinking about you and who you are, I would consider you in the bucket of serial entrepreneur, right? So when Justin, this is for all our listeners, when Justin gets a good idea it is what he just said is true. He is attacking it with the abundance of this is going to be a heck of an endeavor, and it usually is, right? I mean, we've all been down that road where we've gone somewhere and we're like, oh, I don't know about this, but I'm going to keep going and until it's either blown up or it's gone. And he's founded several companies. He's, invented the Hanga, which is a sweet clothes hanger apparatus. And it's cool to see you develop not only as a person, as a human, but as a business owner, as you kind of trek forward. And one of the things I'm more excited about than anything is So Strong, right? So this is a new product that Justin's just started and a new endeavor, and it's a delicious kind of protein bar, a healthy bar, right? For your vision of this company, how, and I know a little bit about of what you're trying to accomplish, but when tying this back into being blessed, you're focusing on blessing other communities, right? And tell me a little bit more about that and how you're looking to focus on not just being blessed, but blessing others as well.
Yeah. So I think I was at about 4 years ago, I was at a church service where the pastor was honoring recent middle school and high school graduates. And he said, I'm going to give you the best piece of advice that I ever can, you'll ever hear. If I could tell you one thing to take with you today for your success in life, it would be to sow good seeds. And it hit me there where it's like, wow, everything we do is sowing and reaping. If I cross the street, Johnny, I saw you and I smiled, most likely you'll smile back. If I gave you the finger and, look crazy at you, you would do the same.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, we live in a universe where it's you reap what you sow. And I thought about that concept, and I looked at some of the communities that have been devastated by lack of information, by poor eating habits, and that in the result has weakened a lot of communities because of COVID. Mental health has been terrible in 2020. And I couple that with some of my passions with nutrition and wellness and optimizing your hormones. And I looked at companies like Nike, who changed the world with shoes. Like, how stupid is that they literally changed the world with a pair of shoes? Shoes are just rubber and plastic that you tie together. And it made people think they could jump like Michael Jordan. I mean, it's so ridiculous. And I said, you know what? I'm going to make this bar, but I'm not only going to make the best tasting, healthiest bar of the planet. I'm going to change the world through this bar. Worked on the messaging, worked on the mission. And I've learned that the mission in life has to be bigger than the product. It has to be bigger than the company. I heard, I think it was Motorola, the guy that invented the Motorola company. He said it was right after World War II, and they asked him, what is your vision for your company? He said, we want Japan to be synonymous with quality products. And I heard that. I'm like, what the heck? Like, his mission was to make Japan synonymous with quality products. And that birthed Hitachi and, Samsung and all these other Japanese companies that you see, because he had a bigger mission. And I said, you know what? Columbus, Ohio is the place I love, Central Ohio. We're going to make Columbus synonymous with health. Every neighborhood, suburbs, inner city, wherever it is, that's what we're going to do. And that birthed So Strong. And it's been a lot of work. And you and Bora have helped me.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's been good. We have the best tasting, healthiest bar in the entire planet. We'll have our next product will be So Strong water that we're coming out with, and it's been a lot of fun, man. And I've enjoyed it.
That's awesome. And I have to say, check it out. Justin's doing the real thing and when I say this, I mean it from the bottom of my heart. He aspires to help others and bless others, and there is no doubt that what he's doing now isn't going to accomplish that. And to think about that, Eric, I know on this topic that we're on with blessed, and I know you've got a lot of thoughts and you've gone down this path yourself and what you've done in your life with children and things of that nature. Thinking about this collectively with Justin, I mean, what would you have to add or discuss on the blessed situation that you've seen?
Well, I'll tell you what, going back to the Bible, we all need help. We all need help standing, right? I believe it was Moses that had to have his arms raised by two other people because he couldn't hold them up himself. He was just exhausted. But as long as he was holding those hands up, those arms up in that victory stance, they were winning. So talking about energy, Justin, before we got started on this podcast, I hear you have 4 daughters, brother. That's blessed. That is blessed. So how do you keep the energy up to start businesses, to do all these things that you're doing as a serial entrepreneur with a big family like that, man? I mean, that's impressive.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that, man. My wife thinks I'm crazy some of the time, but yeah, I think energy, it comes down to number one is we control our thoughts, we can control our attitudes. And I'll never forget, in high school, I saw a quote, I think it was from Vince Lombardi, that talked about attitude. And I'd always associated, hey, that guy has an attitude. That's he has a bad attitude. I thought attitudes were bad. And then it shifted for me, like, wow, I can actually control my reaction. I can control my environment. I can control the thoughts that go in my head. So I try my best to have an attitude of passion. I don't always do a good job doing it, but I really try to emphasize that I control my thoughts. I'm really grateful for my children. I'm grateful for my family, the opportunities that I have. And I would say that from a young age, I learned the concept of working out and exercise. My dad drove that into me. And I think exercising, and I like to eat right, that helps me keep a high level of energy, you know. And then I think stir all that in with having ADHD. I think you have a cocktail that'll just explode. So
I got you, man. I know it.
Yep.
That's good stuff.
Good. Well, for the person, let me ask this, Justin, for the person that maybe, you know, COVID's presented a lot of hardships on a lot of people, right? And church doors have been closed. A lot of people might have fallen off their faith. A lot of people might have gone back to old habits. A lot of people might not just be feeling blessed at all. You know, maybe they feel like they're down on their luck and they don't know kind of where to go from here, or maybe they're in a job that they're trapped in now because of COVID and they can't get out of it, and they're really not feeling blessed right now. So if you're thinking about this collectively, and let's say you were going to start a business and it's right before the pandemic and you're in a hardship right now, and or any of those other people that we just mentioned, what would you tell them as words of encouragement?
Man, that is a great question, dude. Great question, Johnny. You know, I think a lot of times there's practical means of getting over the hill, getting over the hump, but I always start with the spiritual. And there's a song by Bill Withers. It's called Grandma's Hands. And in the song, he talks about his grandmother and how her like physical hands helped change the world. But then there was a spiritual dynamic to his grandmother. And he has this quote in the song that talks about, it says, grandma's hands. He talked about how she like healed a local unwed mother. In the last lyric, she tells the mother to put your life in Jesus's hands. Mm-hmm. And that's what I would say, because we live in a culture where, you know, we have all of our religious perspectives. But if you really think about it, man, that this man, Jesus, like, he changed the world, and he was a poor carpenter from Israel, which blows my mind. He changed the world. And I would tell anybody to in whatever that means to you, is put your life in Jesus' hands. You know, pray and trust in him, and he'll work it out for you. And then from a practical way, I would say, take calculated risk and go for those passions that are in your heart that are filled with integrity, and don't live in scarcity, and don't live out of fear. I think fear is what drags people down. It makes us hopeless. And I can speak for myself. Any anxieties or fears that I've ever had, I look back, they were pointless, you know, right. They were pointless. So I would say, put your life in the hands of Jesus, and what that looks like is prayer. And then I would say, go for your dreams with taking calculated risks.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You know, there's a saying that I sometimes post about, and I've posted it a few times now, and it's basically, it kind of goes like this, that if it doesn't matter in 5 years from now, whatever your situation is, if it does not matter in 5 years from now, why are you spending more than 5 minutes being upset about it right now?
That's
right?
really good, man. Yeah.
If the short-term impact isn't affecting your long-term outcome, don't allow it to steal your joy and your happiness in that moment. And I think, Bori gets kind of upset with me a lot of times, my wife, just because I always tell her, and I told her this morning, this is a prime example. Bora calls me. She says, boys are driving me crazy. They're fighting. It's not even 9 a.m. yet. The home warranty company's not going to come out and fix the furnace. We got to do it ourselves because it's leaking water or something. And, she's really upset. I mean, she was really upset, and this was all before 9 a.m. this morning, today. And I reminded her, I said, Bora, I said, today is 6 months ago today, I was wheeling you back and watching you go back in for brain surgery. I don't care if the boys are fighting. At least they're fighting. At least they're here. I don't care if the furnace is doing whatever it's doing. There's no reason for us to be upset about little things when there are larger impacts on life that people are dealing with right now. And, of course she didn't say I was right, but she knew it. And that's kind of the beauty of having a mindset to where you can't, to what Justin was saying, you can't allow paralysis of fear. I've said this before. You cannot be paralyzed by fear. And you cannot allow your situation to be dictated by the anxiety that you create. You create the anxiety, you create the fear, you can overcome it as well, just by shifting your mindset.
Yeah. Johnny, I have a question for you. When you, in your line of work, when you see the stock like dip down like it did a couple of days ago, and you've been at it for years now, what's your initial reaction? Are you calm? Are you like, hey, buy more? That everything's going to work out? How do you feel about it?
Man, I wish I had the answer to that. It's fun. I'll share this story and maybe it'll answer the question. Last year, obviously, March, April, when market went down about 18,000, that entire last year, I probably lost more sleep, waking up at 3 a.m., reading analyst reports and just market commentary out of a dead sleep, just woke up with anxiety and stress. And I mentioned a client that I've had, since I've been in the business. We had a meeting a couple months ago, and he basically asked me the same thing you just did. And they said, "Hey, how are you doing? We look at this with a distance, but you are managing everything for us. And how are you doing with it?" And I said, I've actually lost more sleep last year than I ever have. I honestly, I would rather have been in Iraq of all places than dealing with the stock market at that time. And what he said made me realize what I do basically. And he said, your lack of sleep allowed me to sleep pretty well during that period. So thank you for that. And that's, to your point. Yes, I have short-term anxiety but the news creates that a lot of times, right? So the news,
paying attention to all that.
Yeah, the news creates the noise, and there's a chart that you can go research it, but I always find it funny to look at this chart. At the bottom of the S&P 500 in 0809, that was the peak of the highest rating CNBC has ever had in history. So at the very bottom of the S&P was the peak of the CNBC news ratings. Does the CNBC news ratings, do they make money on high ratings or low ratings, right? So it's behoove of them to engage their audience off of fear and anxiety, because that creates attention. That's and amazing. So I don't focus on the noise. When we look at strategies, it's more 5, 10 years out, because that's, you got to have a longer time frame. If I were to give you a yo-yo and tell you to walk up some stairs with a yo-yo, and I just stared at the yo-yo, all I would see is going up and down, up and down, up and down. But if I focus at the top of the stairs, eventually I'm going to see you standing at the top. So if you widen your lens a little bit, you can see things a little more clear.
Gotcha.
Hope that helps. That was a good question.
Absolutely.
So, but for all of those that have listened to this podcast, you probably, this is kind of like a double down podcast. You got all kinds of information, probably more than what you bargained for. So thanks, Justin.
No problem.
Appreciate it. That's that ADHD kicking in. It's going everywhere. But Eric, final thoughts from you? Anything that you wanted to add?
Now, just going to thank you, Johnny, for putting this on again. And Justin, thank you so much for being a great guest.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm honored. I always like to talk to Johnny Dawson. He's the man.
He is the man. Absolutely.
It's great meeting you too, Eric.
Thank you, sir. And we want to say our last thank you to you, the listening audience. Thanks for tuning in and listening to the Elements of Success podcast with Johnny Dawson. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Johnny comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family. Again, thanks for listening today. For everyone at the Elements of Success, this is Eric Johnson speaking on behalf of Johnny and I want you to know we feel blessed that you're listening to this right now. Share it with somebody that you want to bless, and then you guys can have a great conversation about it. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Elements of Success podcast. If you have not subscribed to the podcast, please click the subscribe button below. If you know anyone who would benefit from listening to this podcast, click the share button.